Emily Anderson, who's going to talk to us about litter on our planet. So go ahead, Emily.
Hi guys, I'm just going to bring up my presentation here. Bear with me for a second. Can everybody see the presentation? Thumbs up, awesome. Okay. So as Stephanie mentioned, my name is Emily, and I am the assistant manager for the Great Canadian Shoreline Cleanup. I'm located in Toronto, Ontario, and so just before I get started on my presentation, I wanted to take a moment to acknowledge the land that I live on, which is the traditional territory of many nations, including the Mississaugas of the Credit, the Anishinaabe, the Chippewa, the Haudenosaunee, and the Wendat peoples. And it is now home to many diverse First Nations, Inuit, and Métis. And we also acknowledge that Toronto is covered by Treaty 13 with the Mississaugas of the Credit. So, and also a huge thank you to Oceanwise Education for having me here today, of course. And I will be presenting on how municipalities across Canada are using our citizen science litter data to reduce waste and plastic pollution within their communities to ultimately squash litterbugs. So just so you know what to expect during this presentation, I'll run through the agenda quickly. So first, I'll be providing an overview of the Great Canadian Shoreline Cleanup for those of you who may not be familiar. Then I'll get into the major issues our program works to address. So this is litter and plastic pollution. Then we'll get into the role of municipalities in addressing those issues. And finally, I'll introduce you to the Shoreline Cleanup's Clean Shoreline Communities program. So let's get started. The Great Canadian Shoreline Cleanup began in 1994 with a group of very motivated Vancouver Aquarium employees and volunteers who decided to do a cleanup on the beach in Stanley Park. In 2010, the Vancouver Aquarium partnered with WWF Canada, and then in 2017, the Vancouver Aquarium expanded to become Oceanwise. And as already mentioned, Oceanwise is a global conservation organization focused on protecting and restoring our world's oceans. And today we are very proud to say that GCSC, or the Shoreline Cleanup, is the largest direct action conservation program in Canada. So since our establishment in 1994, our volunteers have organized a lot of cleanups, over 27,000 of them. And during these cleanups, they collected over 2 million kilograms of litter across 44,000 kilometers of shoreline. And when it becomes safe and clear that the Shoreline Cleanup's regular activities are able to resume to normal, we're anticipating our 1 millionth citizen scientist, hopefully early next year. So what our volunteers do is collect plastics and other forms of litter within their communities or others across the entire country. And then they submit that data online to our website. And with that data, we put together our annual report, which includes the Dirty Dozen. This is a list of the 12 most commonly found items on our shorelines from coast to coast to coast. And unsurprisingly, you'll see on this list that most of these items fall within the category of single-use plastics, many of which are unfortunately not considered to be recyclable in most municipal recycling streams, and unfortunately end up in landfill or the natural environment. And this includes items such as cigarette butts, which I'm sure we all see quite often as they've been the number one most found item a few years running now. And then not far behind is tiny plastic or foam, which as we know could have started as a larger item and then just broken down into smaller pieces, followed by food wrappers and bottle caps. Other single-use plastic items on the list include plastic bags, plastic bottles, straws, some forms of packaging, foam, and coffee cups. And we also put together a dirty dozen list for the different provinces and territories, and we can even do different communities. But we find that the majority of the items do remain the same across the country, with maybe the exception of the Atlantic provinces, who sometimes have fishing related gear like nets or ropes on their list as well. So with that, we know what we're finding on our shorelines, but the question still remains as to where all of this litter is coming from, or the source of the litter. And what scientists have discovered is that 80% of marine litter actually originated on land before it ends up in the ocean. And what these studies have concluded is that this plastic that's ending up in the oceans from land is mostly a result of poor or insufficient waste management and a lack of sufficient recycling and recovery. And unfortunately, waste management is not equal across the country within different communities or provinces or territories even. Not all communities have access to recycling facilities or even a proper landfill, as we have here in Toronto or in Vancouver. In addition, to make things even more complicated, the policies around waste management differ across the country from province to province, even from one community to the next. For example, I live in the city of Toronto, and our neighboring city, the city of Mississauga, we have different rules around if black plastic can be recycled, for example. So that can be really difficult for businesses or individuals who are really trying to do the right thing and recycle the right items and things like that. And so as a result of all of this, litter has become an incredibly huge and critical issue facing all of Canada's waterways in communities across the country, from lakes and rivers to all of our ocean coastlines. In fact, and this is true outside of Canada as well, plastics are considered to be ubiquitous in our environment, meaning they appear absolutely everywhere, even in the most remote regions where we never would have expected to find them. And this is mostly as a result of the fact that litter can be transported really long distances via things like wind or water currents. So when these items do end up in the natural environment, they never really disappear. And this is because plastics don't biodegrade in the environment. Instead, they do what's called, they photodegrade into smaller pieces, eventually becoming what is known as microplastics. So these are small, tiny pieces of plastic, smaller than 5 millimeters in size. And photodegradation is when something breaks down as a result of long-term exposure in the sun. And when this happens, when these plastics are breaking down, or even if they do remain in their original form for a longer period of time, they can really have a lot of negative impacts on wildlife and ecosystems as a whole. For example, species might ingest the microplastics because they're so small, and this can cause things like eventual starvation because they feel full when they're really not, or it can cause reproductive issues. And there's also the issue of biomagnification. So this just means a buildup of the toxin or the microplastic within the food chain. And eventually we could end up eating that fish that had been contaminated by plastics. Other ways that plastic impacts wildlife include entanglement by larger items, usually things like maybe a fishing net or plastic bags, for example. And then also environmental toxicity. So plastics contain a lot of really harmful chemicals that can leach out into the natural environment. And then in response, impacting our species, unfortunately. And then finally, there are some studies around the thought that plastics can introduce invasive species if they're on top of a water bottle that's floating in the water, for example. It can be transported from one region to the next. So with all that being said, to help mitigate these issues, we believe that although it's definitely important that we are continuing to remove plastics and other forms of debris from our environment through things like cleanups, it's also and ultimately really important that we continue to see our data being used for longer term solutions that actually keeps litter from getting into the environment in the first place. Specifically those single-use items that could definitely be replaced, or there's tons of alternatives for. So bear with me as I go through a couple of the examples of how our data has been used. I think it's really telling to the importance of citizen science data. So some of the recent ways include, in 2017, the city of White Rock and the Surrey Naturalists shared results of foam collected by the Shoreline Cleanup along the Nikomeco River to restrict the use of expanded polystyrene foam on waterways. In 2018, the city of Vancouver utilized our data. Oh, sorry about that. The city of Vancouver utilized our data to produce their single-use item reduction strategy. And the city of Toronto did something similar in that they utilized our data to support their single-use waste management strategy. On a slightly smaller scale, we also contribute to things like monitoring efforts for what's called the Butt Free Beach campaign. And this is a program out of the Lake Huron Coastal Center, so in the Great Lakes region, which has actually led to more waste receptacles in that area because of how many cigarette butts our volunteers were collecting. Similarly, we submit data collected through the Butt Blitz campaigns, also around the Great Lakes, by an organization called A Greener Future. And then on a larger scale, and something that was really cool for us was in 2019, Prime Minister Justin Trudeau's office issued a statement on Canada's commitment to eliminate single-use plastics, and the press release cited Shoreline Cleanup's data as a really reliable source of information on the topic. And then following in 2020, our data was used as the main source of information to quantify shoreline pollution in Canada's draft assessment of plastic pollution. And finally, also in 2020, the government of British Columbia published a report called What We Heard on Marine Debris in BC, which could hopefully or potentially lead to changes on encapsulated foam floats. So those are just a few of the ways that our data has been used to influence policy and create change in Canada. And although we definitely believe and know that action across all levels of government is absolutely imperative, we also believe that based on some of the recent significant policy innovations in waste management and plastic pollution in Canada, that actually call on municipalities to take action, that it's a really opportune time for communities to take action and to really establish themselves as leaders in the fight against plastic pollution. So for example, Canada was a signatory and leader of the Oceans Plastics Charter, where the federal government committed to, and I quote, supporting all levels of government in developing and implementing effective and innovative solutions for solid waste management and plastic pollution. Also, the issue of plastic pollution is so relevant and evident across Canada in many municipalities. And we saw this in the results from the draft science assessment of plastic pollution published in 2020. Excuse me. And then finally, all levels of government committed to implementing the Canada-wide strategy for zero plastic waste in 2018 to achieve results in key areas, including single-use plastics, consumer awareness, research and monitoring and cleanups. And all of these things are and will likely be implemented and moved forward by local community level action, so municipalities. And it's important that there's resources to support them in doing that. So to support these municipalities and to help mobilize municipal governments across Canada to implement plastic waste solutions within their communities, we created the Clean Shoreline Community Designation. So basically, these are municipalities who agree to work with us, the Great Canadian Shoreline Cleanup, to address issues of litter and plastic pollution within their communities by using our citizen science data. And we can do things like what the City of Vancouver or Toronto have done and create these policies or strategies to ban or eliminate some single-use plastic items. By becoming designated, our hope is that we're providing a framework whereby municipalities are able to better align themselves with the federal legislation that I just mentioned on waste and plastic pollution, specifically the Canada-wide strategy on zero plastic waste. So currently there are 5 designees across the country. And those are the little blue markers on the map. So we have 2 in British Columbia, which are the District of West Vancouver and the City of Vancouver. We have 2 in Alberta, the City of Calgary and Lethbridge, and then we have 1 in Ontario, the City of Hamilton. So over the next few years, as we are relaunching the program right now, we're hoping that we're able to bring on board more municipalities so that we have a more even reach across the country. So those little red plus signs with the numbers are where we hope to expand over the next year or so, mostly bringing on or targeting municipalities that already have a high amount of litter data and therefore the greatest potential to impact policy. As well, we're hoping to target areas, what we consider to be hotspots, so areas that are highly littered as deemed by the community, but aren't actually registered cleanups on our website. In this way, we're able to increase the amount of data that we have, as well as our overall reach of the program. But overall, our goal with this and all of the work that we do is to build a network of municipalities who are just as passionate about reducing litter and plastic pollution as we are on the Shoreline Cleanup team, but also within Oceanwise. So I know this is all things that municipalities can do and how they can be, how they can make a difference, but it's the citizens within those communities who really take charge and lead a lot of this stuff. So you might be wondering what you can do and what your role could be in all of this. So there's a few different ways. First, you might reduce your own plastic footprint. So doing something like an at-home waste audit, plastic waste audit, so you can see what sort of items you're throwing out the most and how you might replace or find alternatives for them. Second, you might lead or join a cleanup, because this produces the data that we use to hopefully influence change and push policy and come up with these solutions. So doing those cleanups and submitting the data is super, super important. But I will note that currently we are asking our volunteers to postpone or cancel cleanups just because of the current situation surrounding COVID-19. But stay tuned, because we will be giving an update soon on next steps. And then finally, you can reach out to your municipality. We are a small team and we're not able to reach every corner and community of the country. And so with your help, hopefully we can help identify communities who would be really interested, because maybe they're already involved in reducing waste, or maybe they don't know where to start, and this would be a good way to get involved. And something I do like to mention is that your municipality doesn't need to be on water or near a large body of water. Absolutely everywhere. As I said, litter travels, and so all communities are important in the fight against plastic pollution. So with that, I will end my presentation. Thank you guys so much for listening. I'm happy to answer any questions the best that I can. And you can reach out to me at any time. I'm happy to chat about this or anything else. So thank you so much.
Well, thank you so much for sharing, Emily. It's always great to learn more about plastic pollution. There's always so much to learn more about, and different ways that have worked, haven't, or something else to try.
Yeah, absolutely.
So one of the topics that was talked about a bit in the chat today was cigarette butts. some folks were mentioning that they still see those a lot in parks.
Yeah.
I mean, do you have any suggestions on things that can be done? I know you mentioned them a bit, but
Yeah, I mean, I can speak a little bit to some of the issues that we've heard from citizens or things that we've been involved in. So, unfortunately, I think there's maybe some communication or community level education that's missing around cigarette butts, because not everyone knows that the filter is actually plastic, and so they think maybe that by tossing it on the ground it might biodegrade or something like that, which is not the case. So in the case of the Butt Free Beach campaign, they did a huge education promotion around that, posters, things up along the beaches so that people kind of see it and maybe think twice. And then with that, they also offer cigarette butt specific waste disposal units around the beach so that people have access to another, I guess, another way of disposing rather than just throwing it on the ground. I think that it's such a hard thing to tackle because, you know, I don't know. I think there's definitely a lot of work to be done around that, but I don't have the answer, unfortunately, but that's what we've done so far.
yeah, I agree too. I think a lot of it is, access to being able to throw it away, as well as also that, almost like a social stigma of, oh, it doesn't matter kind of
Yeah.
methods. I know that I have quite a few friends that unfortunately are still smokers, even though they know there's the health risk.
Yeah.
And being ocean lovers, they actually carry around tins with them so
Oh,
that they
okay.
can put their butts in there, and then next garbage can, empty it
Yeah,
out. So
that's a good
there's
tip.
still ways to help the ocean and
Yeah.
still keep that going if that
Yeah.
is
Yeah.
what you do in your life.
Yeah.
Um, Another great question is, I don't know if you know the answer to this. I have a bit of an answer. What country has the most litter?
Oh, I don't know that. I mean, I think I don't personally know that. I don't want to make a guess just in case it's not right, but I think that it's hard to give an answer to that just because not all countries are equal in the amount of waste management that they have. So comparing a country like Canada or the United States to Indonesia, for example, I don't know how fair that would be just because our infrastructure is completely different. And to the same tone, I guess, you can't compare the infrastructure and the amount of waste management um, that we have down south in, Toronto, Vancouver area to places like Iqaluit in Nunavut, so where they don't have the recycling and whatnot. So I don't know the answer to that, but I think that's just something to consider if you do, Google that later on. Just remember that it's not all equal, I guess.
Yeah, and I know that, certain countries seem to get blamed a lot of the time, but a lot of those countries are actually the ones that are doing the biggest to tackle those problems. I know that India has been working really hard. Indonesia declared it like a national emergency, and they have
Yeah.
a lot of their own uh, troops actually working on cleaning up their beaches. So,
Yeah.
being in a first world country where there's so many opportunities to help, we're not doing a whole lot.
Exactly. And like I said, litter travels so far. So, just because it ends up in one place doesn't mean that it was created by that community in the
Yeah.
first place. So,
I did Google it,
okay.
and I actually, because I was curious,
Yeah.
and there's an article by USA Today, who, with the help of some of their staff, as well as looking at the World Bank's What a Waste global database, they were looking at sort of the amount of trash that is produced with regular municipal solid waste per person in that country, as well as sort of other industries contributing to that. And they actually found Canada was number one.
Yeah.
Per capita, with all of the construction waste and other kind of larger agricultural waste, industrial waste, we were actually number one at about 36.1 metric tons.
That's so sad.
Annual waste per person.
My goodness. Yeah, that's it's definitely not what you would expect. I guess just because of our own thinking around, I don't know, but yeah, that's sad.
I see another question from Arwen. Is there a campaign to get rid of the garbage island? Is it still growing because of all the plastic pollution?
So I know that there are different smaller nonprofits or organizations who work to remove the litter as best they can from the garbage patches, but I think it's also important to note that they're not as they might be shown in movies or online where it's like, a bigger pile of garbage just floating in the ocean. A lot of it is underneath the water, so it's not as easy to remove, I guess, as you might think. In my opinion, as I said, even with the cleanups, although it's incredibly important that we do remove it from the environment, the best thing we can be doing is stopping it from getting there in the first place. And so focusing on finding alternatives, better infrastructure, policies, things like that, so that it's not getting out there in the first place.
I definitely agree. And doing cleanups in your own community is a great way to help that and do your part. They're also one of the other ones that I think is really cool for people to check out is the Ocean Cleanup. So I'll post a link to their website in here. They are trying to help with taking that large portion of plastic in the oceans out. It is a challenging endeavor. So I know that they have hit some road bumps, but they're getting there. And that's just one of the many groups. So if you're looking to also maybe donate to helping, the Great Canadian Shoreline Cleanup is always looking for help in funding. And maybe to learn more, you can go check out the Ocean Cleanup as well.
Definitely. Every little bit that gets out of the environment helps. Even though it might seem small, it really does have a really big impact.
Well, if you have any other questions, please let us know in the question and answer section or in the chat. I'll look through again real quick, but there was another question about all of the thinner plastics that we're seeing in grocery stores a lot for packaged food goods and things like that. Are we seeing those newer plastics in the outdoors a lot more now? Do you know?
Do you mean like the thin membrane layer in packaging, or more like the produce type bags?
I think probably some of that, maybe also like clamshells, things like that. But
oh, right.
There's so much, it's hard to really pinpoint.
Yeah, I mean, packaging is always on our Dirty Dozen list, so there is quite a lot being found in the environment. Especially I would say during like the summer months when people are going out having a picnic or something, and then they're creating all that recreational waste just because, and I mean, I'm seeing it a lot, especially now when people aren't really able to do much else other than get out, at least here in the park, and have a picnic or something like that. And so there's a lot more have that happening, and the garbages are just overflowing. They just can't handle it, and so it ends up in the environment, even if someone did put it in the garbage. So yeah, it's definitely one of our top items.
Yeah, I know that helping out with a lot of the shoreline cleanups that happen in Stanley Park, right by the Vancouver Aquarium, we don't tend to see as many of the larger, kind of harder plastic food containers, but we do see tons of juice box straw wrappers.
Yeah.
So many. I guess they're really lightweight and fly around, as well as lots of disposable cutlery. Those are two that really stick with me in my head.
Yes, something that I've been seeing a lot, and I think that again, this is something where maybe more education could really help, is seeing like biodegradable or compostable plastics in the environment. A lot of or most municipal recycling streams or composting infrastructure can't actually compost those bioplastics or compostable plastics, and so they would end up in the landfill anyway. So I think maybe if someone is getting takeout and they see compostable pork, for example, as an option, they might take that and, you know, throw it in the environment as if it were like a banana peel and it would just biodegrade, sort of thing. So I think that's another area where education could play like a really key role.
Yeah. Oh, I see. Okay, I've got another question here. Do we ever come across any like animals while cleaning up the shore? Maybe animals that may have come across that plastic,
Yeah.
maybe are entangled?
I have not personally. Thankfully, I think I would cry if I saw something like that. Yeah, I have not personally. I've been with the program for about a year now, so not super long. As far as I know, my colleagues haven't either. I will say though, I'm a diver and I've seen waste underwater, and so whether or not, I mean, I know it gets there. I haven't seen any animal, you know, entangled in it, thankfully, but it definitely does get to the water, and it's hard to remove, and I can definitely see an animal swimming up to it and eventually getting caught in it. So,
Yeah.
but thankfully, no.
Linda was just mentioning that they were on a recent trip to India, and India, one of those countries that's really trying to tackle their plastic pollution, they were given disposable wooden cutlery, many of the places that they were going. So
that's awesome. That's a great alternative.
Yeah, great alternative. Also, another question, do you have a resource or research paper that you found super helpful that you like to share with others?
I can share some. We keep a whole Excel sheet as part of our program where we list, I guess, some of the better papers that we find help support what we're trying to educate on. So if you do want to reach out to me, I'm happy to share that with you. Same with if you want some resources to reach out to your municipality with, like just a one-pager to kind of give them an idea of what's going on and how they can help. I'm happy to provide that. You can reach out to me anytime, and maybe I'll put my email in the chat so it's easier if that helps.
Well, is there a place on the Great Canadian Shoreline Cleanup website where that would be shared?
That's a great point. Yes, there is. You can go to our website, shorelinecleanup.ca, and then at the very top, you'll see municipalities. You can click on that, and then it'll say Clean Shoreline Communities, and my email and contact information is there for you to reach out to.
Amazing. A great place for others to find more information. That website has lots in there, as well as some great educational pieces if you're looking to maybe have your kids' classroom incorporate more of that learning, or just to educate others. There's some great infographics, some of which Emily shared with us today. There was also a question on, I guess, how can we contact you later? Are there other ways to connect with you or the Great Canadian Shoreline Cleanup to continue the chat or inquire about things?
Yeah, I mean, there's many ways you can connect with us, sorry. You can follow us on our social media pages, and we update there with upcoming events like webinars such as this, or if we put out a new resource or we have new data to share, that's where it'll likely get shared first. Like I said, my email and my phone number is always open. I'm always happy to chat about this kind of stuff. I love it. Same with my colleagues. And our website, we update it regularly. So yeah, please visit there, and you should find everything that you need.
Amazing. Another question from Arwen. Are microbeads still being found despite the bans on their use?
It's hard. That's not something that we necessarily mark on our data card. It would probably just go onto the category of small plastics or tiny plastics. Just because they are so small, they're not necessarily easy for our volunteers to see in order to pick up. I haven't done any research recently in that area. I know though last September I was in Iqaluit, and I was talking to a researcher there who said that she was finding microbeads there, which they have no place there. They've obviously traveled from down south. So I think they're still around. I don't think it's been long enough since they've been banned that, you know, they wouldn't be around, but I don't personally, you know, see them. I see other things a lot more. So I think the ban has definitely helped, but yeah, again, it's hard to say just through our data specifically because it's such a small item.
Yeah, definitely. I know that we were talking about ways to connect and maybe approach the municipality, but are there any tips or suggestions that you think work really well?
I think it would be good to, if you're comfortable reaching out to your municipality yourself, I think it would be good to maybe look into what they're already currently doing so that maybe you can start off on that note and say, hey, I saw that you were working on your single-use plastic reduction strategy. Did you know that the Great Canadian Shoreline Cleanup offers data to help support things like that? And then you can kind of get into it. But if you're not comfortable, or if you'd like us to sort of put together an email with some resources that you can still send yourself, we're more than happy to do that.
Amazing. Well, I'll take a look here to see if there are any other questions. One of the things that I always like to mention is that I know that sometimes we like to kind of scold others for littering, which is good as a reminder, but even better is every once in a while just encourage someone or thank them for, you know, making sure that that litter is picked up and put away. If I see somebody cleaning up, I want to make sure that they know that I'm thankful, because that positive feedback works way better than the negative feedback.
Totally agree. I absolutely agree. And I think just doing by example and you know, throwing things out yourself and making sure that, you know, you're doing what you can is a great example for other people around you.
Yeah. Nitesh was wondering, do some things from the shore travel far away with waves in the water, like to the middle of the ocean?
Yeah, absolutely. So that's one of the main ways that litter travels. It's that as well as wind. So they can travel, they won't necessarily stay on the top of the water where you can see them. They might go lower in the water column and potentially really deep where you can't even find it anymore. It just, I guess, depends on how heavy the item is, what type of plastic, things like that. But yeah, absolutely. I mean, that's how it all got into the garbage patch. That's how it travels to different countries even. So unfortunately, yes, it's very possible.
Yeah, and there's a lot that we're seeing in the Arctic these days too, which does not have a very high population.
No, yeah, it's really unfortunate that I think some communities are suffering from it more, and they've had the least to do with it all, right?
Definitely. Um, One of the other questions is, can you find it in food in the ocean?
In food,
Yeah,
so like in the fish that we are fishing, things like that.
I believe so.
Yeah, absolutely. So like if a plankton were to eat or ingest the microplastic and then that were to be eaten by another fish, it would just biomagnify within the food chain. And eventually it could end up being one of the fish that are caught to be consumed by humans. And so that's not my area of expertise, but I do know that it happens. I'm sorry, I can't be more specific than that.
All good. One of the things that I would love to know real quick is, how did you get into this work, this field of work?
Yeah, I guess it's kind of a weird, not, well, maybe typical, maybe not. I really got more passionate about plastic pollution through my master's with my research supervisor. I didn't go into my master's wanting to study plastic pollution or anything like that. but I met her and she was really passionate about it, you know, made a great case, and I started doing my own research in that area, and it just really stuck. And I think what, you know, kept me interested is the fact that this is a worldwide issue. It impacts everyone. It's everywhere. And I'm really, I guess, not more interested, but I'm curious about the whole waste management side of it, and how that plays a part in all of this, and the inequalities between, you know, different communities and how some might be impacted more, things like that. So it was just kind of, it just sort of happened in the last, you know, 3 or 4 years, because of someone else who was passionate about it, and they just sort of got me into it, I guess you could say. But yeah.
That's always a great way to get involved. And you know what? One of my favorite things about you know, plastic pollution and what we can do to help is everyone can get involved. It doesn't take a lot
Absolutely.
to help.
Yeah.
And that means that we can get people from all different backgrounds. We can get a huge, diverse group that's all helping together and trying to, you know, inspire young youth of all different backgrounds to help as well.
Absolutely, that's definitely a great part about it. It's very community-based, conservation, I guess you could say, in a lot of ways. So I really like that about it.
Definitely. All right, I will take a look here, see if there's any other questions. We'll give a moment for maybe one more, I think. Good question. How do you volunteer in your city? This will be our last question.
For cleanups, if you go to our website, at shorelinecleanup.ca, there will be a link at the top where you can choose to either lead or join a cleanup. So if you're choosing to join one, then that would be a cleanup that is already listed, it's already happening, someone else has organized it, and you just want to tag along, so to speak. Or you can choose to lead one, and you can either go to our map and choose a location that's already on the map within your city or your community, or you can just put a little dot on the map and create your own location. So, which we always love when people do that, because that gives us more locations on our map. And then you just choose your date. You would reach out to your municipality for supplies, things like that. And that's it. And if you have any issues, you can reach out to us, and we are more than happy to help. But as I said, unfortunately, we are asking people to cancel or postpone just for the time being because of everything that's going on. But we will be updating very soon on our website, so stay tuned.
Awesome. Well, I might take one more last question quickly, which is, you know, how much are plastic fibers from clothes affecting the environment? And this kind of ties into that. If any animals swallow any of this plastic, you know, how can it affect them? So maybe you can just quickly talk about that.
Sure. So plastic fibers are, I think, one of the most commonly found microplastics in the environment. It happens a lot of the time from a washing machine. You wash your clothes and then it goes down and misses the trap, and then they end up in the ocean or lakes because they're so small. They just go right through the filters in any waste management type facilities. I know that the plastics lab at Oceanwise is actually very involved with that, and I would definitely recommend you check them out, just because, again, that's not my area of expertise, but I know they know a lot about it. And then in terms of what happens to animals, it could be a lot of different things. As I said, sometimes they can eat microplastics or ingest it somehow, and that can make them feel full, and so they won't continue to eat other things and potentially starve, unfortunately. It can impact their reproductive system. If they're entangled by it, then they can, you know, they can't breathe, or they can't get food or anything like that. There's also leaching of chemicals from these plastics, which can impact the animal. but I think there's still a lot of research that needs to be done, and in terms of how long it takes before the animal would be impacted, I'm not sure. I think it would depend on the amount, the type of plastic, things like that.
Amazing. Well, I also put in a link to the OceanWise research page that specifically talks about some of our plastic programs. And if you would like to learn more about some of the plastics research that we do at OceanWise, there are even a few of the research papers from our scientists linked there for you to take a look at. And that's right. There is going to be a talk for one of our Tales from the Deep in August. So in August, you can tune in and learn all about the clothes and microfibers in the ocean and how that is connecting. So if you want to learn more about that, take a look at our future talks coming up. But I will use that as a segue to say thank you all so much for joining us. Thank you so much, Emily. I'm just going to let you know, everyone, where you can find out some more information for some future talks. So I'm going to share that real quick. Oh, I'm just going to take back my privilege here. All right. See if I can share here. All right, so Emily, are you able to pass me back that? 1 minute. Sorry, everyone. Did that give it back?
I think I just did it.
There we go. Thank you so much. I'm just going to share something so it's easier for you all to visually see what I'm trying to talk about. Hopefully you can see that. So this was our talk today, our Tales from the Deep, Squashing Litterbugs in the Pursuit of Cleaner Communities. Next week on Thursday at 1 p.m. Pacific Standard Time, we'll have Keeping Up with the Arctic, the Race Against Rapid Change with Eric Solomon of OceanWise. And as we go through these times, we are, at OceanWise, we are reflecting and looking at ways to continue our work and allyship towards racial justice and a more equitable society. And we are continuing to share what we learn with you, and we appreciate anything that you can do to give us more information. So vice versa. If you want more information on what we are looking into doing or how we are trying to help create more diversity in conservation, you can take a look at our Aqua blog. If you want to find out more opportunities to connect with us, you can take a look at our education.ocean.org site for activities, discussion boards, lots of different projects for all ages. You can even find links to our next program at the ocean.org/learnonline website, as well as links to our wet lab biologist talks if you want to learn a little bit about some of the animals at the aquarium, at least the ones without backbones. We also, at the Vancouver Aquarium and OceanWise, although the aquarium is opening its doors to some of the public, it's still not enough to really keep us going financially. So if you love what we do at OceanWise, please, if you have a little bit to spare, help us out. And please, share the word, let everyone know about the amazing programs we're doing so that they can hopefully share as well. So thank you all so much for joining us today, and hopefully we will see you next Thursday and the Thursdays in the future. Thank you so much, Emily, for joining us, and thank you all for joining us today, everyone.
Bye.
Bye.